Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Transportation Security Administration has quietly been advancing big changes to the private contractor security screening program. TSA says the goal is innovation and better passenger experience, but it comes against the backdrop of the Trump administration's efforts to prioritize more TSA operations. For the latest, Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me now. Justin, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, Terry.
We've talked about the security screening partnership in the past. What is this new concept that TSA has been pitching for privatized airport security screening?
The concept TSA is calling TSA GoldPlus. And this would involve private contractors managing both the employees and the technology that screens airline passengers and luggage for banned items and other security threats. And TSA itself would provide oversight to ensure that all the systems meet federal security standards. TSA is tying this concept into the screening partnership program. They pitched Orlando International Airport in February. We obtained a briefing flyer that they pitched where it says long-term screening partnership program contracts will redirect funds into investable partnerships where industry operators manage both the technology and the screening workforce. Right now, the screening partnership program is a little bit different. What SPP does is it has private contractors manage that screening workforce, but TSA, by and large, manages the technology, has oversight of the technology, designs the checkpoints and things like that. So bottom line is that this GoldPlus concept would give airports and industry a lot more control over how they design those screening checkpoints and security screening systems, really in the name of innovation and things like that. So that's the high-level concept at this point.
You said you'd heard about this through a flyer. How has TSA been advancing this concept?
Yeah, there was this flyer that was pitched at Orlando International Airport. I spoke with, multiple aviation security industry sources who said TSA has been in conversations with multiple large airports about this concept over the last 6 or so months. It actually popped up in a public RFI, but not an RFI for GoldPlus, an RFI for third-party testing equipment that TSA put out there back in September. And so it's clear they've been thinking about this concept since at least that point in time back in September. But we don't know a lot about what it is. It's not a program of record. It didn't pop up in TSA's budget. It hasn't really been discussed in congressional testimony. That's one reason why some folks would like to see this kind of shared and out there, because it's something that TSA has been sort of pitching airports on, but it's not really widely known at this point how it ties into the broader Trump administration's plans to privatize TSA.
Well, speaking of those broader plans, you talked about the expansion of the SPP program in the 27 budget for TSA. How does this connect to that?
Right. So in that budget request that was just released a few weeks ago, TSA would expand the screening partnership program to about 250 really small airports across the country. We're talking regional airports that maybe have 2 to 4 or 5 flights per day. So really those smallest airports would be required, actually, according to TSA's budget request, to opt into the screening partnership program. But again, that budget request does not mention GoldPlus or anything like this. However, we know that there is, a strong desire within the Trump administration to privatize TSA. It was actually a core goal of Project 2025 to privatize TSA airport screening operations and have TSA maintain oversight. So that certainly would kind of be in line with the GoldPlus model. Russell Vought, the White House budget director, obviously one of those main authors of Project 2025. And the Office of Management and Budget's 2027 budget overview states that the SPP expansion would just begin the process of privatizing TSA. So it's clear that there is a desire here to explore kind of this broader privatization of TSA, but we're still kind of seeing these pieces come into focus of how exactly that would happen.
You described this GoldPlus concept up front as investable partnerships. That certainly sounds like a private kind of organization. What are you hearing some of the arguments for and against privatization of TSA operations?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Obviously the longer, sort of the more historic argument for privatizing TSA has been just around the fact that the TSA, there's airport screening operations in Europe and across the world that are run by private contractors. There is the idea that, the government could save money by privatizing airport screening operations rather than having government employees do that. And then more recently, of course, there's been these long government shutdowns last falls and then now the ongoing partial government shutdown, a record-long shutdown where TSA employees, because they were not being paid, were calling out larger and larger numbers as the shutdown drags on. And that, of course, led to those big long lines at some airports across the country. And so the argument more recently has been that privatized airport screening operations would, to some degree, insulate the whole flying experience from being tripped up by disagreements in Congress. Of course, there's a lot of arguments against privatizing TSA. TSA was created because of 9/11 and because there were private screening operations in place at airports across the country prior to 9/11. And, Congress and kind of leaders, political leaders at the time decided that there needed to be an agency that would oversee and be in charge and staff, screening operations instead. And so you see, of course, the American Federation of Government Employees, which represents TSA staff, kind of advancing the argument that this would, put profit before security if you privatized airport screening again.
The GoldPlus concept, you've said, is not a program of record. It doesn't officially exist in any kind of government documentation. What's going to happen next? More discussions or, how's it going to move forward?
That's the gold question here. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions about how serious DHS and the Trump administration, maybe even TSA itself, is about carrying this GoldPlus concept forward as a sort of program of record, as its plan for privatizing TSA. But they've certainly been pitching airports on it, and they've certainly, you look at some conferences that have happened recently where GoldPlus has been the title of a panel where TSA officials were going to present. They've been talking about it now for a while, and so it's floating out there. It's being pitched. What happens when an airport signs up? And so that's another big question. Will the airports go for it? That's kind of the key question for this concept's efficacy, because it would require an airport to say, yeah, this looks like a good deal. I'd opt into it. But the problem is airports, might not want to take that risk of being the first GoldPlus airport and going down this path and potentially having this messy transition period where they're transitioning to kind of something else. And so the bottom line is everyone I've talked to, either for or against GoldPlus or for or against privatization, want more details on what exactly this is. An industry official I talked to said airports need a lot more information about this before they decide whether it's for them or not. And so we'll see whether TSA kind of opens up a little bit more about what this is and what their plans are for it.
That's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin will certainly stand by for those details.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.